Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the King Power Stadium. Connor Southwell here after Norwich City's 3-0 defeat to Leicester City here this evening. Probably in truth a tale of two halves. I get a feeling that I'm going to be hurried along, so we might have to make this one short and snappy. I mean that this time, unlike on Sunday where then I proceeded to waffle on for 15 minutes. Frankly, as I said, a Jekyll and Hyde performance in many ways from Norwich City. The first half was as encouraging as we've seen and probably came down to the points that a lot of people have made this season about lack of quality from an attacking perspective. For instance, there was a moment where Milo Rashica did really well down the right-hand side to lead Norwich away on the counter-attack, only then for him to get the ball wrong as he tried to play Tony Springett through on goal. He was really busting a gut to try and get in the box and failed to do that. And then fine margins as Timu Pukki was slotted through by Springett just before half-time. Tried to catch Kasper Schmeichel off guard at his front post. Managed to get the shot past the Leicester keeper, but unfortunately saw it come off the post. And from there, really, it felt like Norwich City were going to be kind of treading water in the second half and probably conceding goals. And Leicester came out with a real resurgence. They started off with a flurry of corners towards kind of the opposite goal, as opposed to the one behind me. And it didn't take long then for again, we speak about Norwich's quality or lack of in the final third. This came from Milo Rashica making a wrong decision, looked across the ball for Tony Springett, just hung the ball up a little bit too high. Leicester then were able to break away. I think James Justin skipped away from Springett. Then it was Harvey Barnes who played Jamie Vardy through on goal, and his shot took a deflection off the standing leg of Grant Hanley, loops over Angus Gunn and goes into the back of the net for 1-0. 2-0, a really well-worked move. Justin, again, maybe I'm getting the first and second goals confused. All the Norwich City goals that they're conceding feel the same at the moment. But anyway, Barnes slots Vardy through. Really clever movement from him. And you kind of know what you're going to get from Jamie Vardy. He's quick. He's intelligent. He times his runs to perfection. It feels very difficult to catch him offside, in truth, because he can start those couple of yards behind you and then advance sort of ahead of you to produce the kind of finish that is just devastating and made it 2-0. And then the third goal comes from Dewsbury Hall's cross, which Angus Gunn palms out. More on him in a little while. And James Maddison smashes it home for free. And really, Norwich City again. And I've spoken to I heard Dean Smith speak to our colleagues at Radio Norfolk and also spoke to Angus Gunn as well. And they both said the same thing, really, about this Norwich City side not being durable enough to deal with setbacks or to respond to adversity when it comes their way. And that is probably a really prominent point about this Norwich City side, that actually at 0-0 when they're in games, if they can keep them at 0-0, or even if they're winning football matches, they look okay. They look confident enough to zip the ball around. And whether this is a mentality point or a confidence point, I guess that's probably for Dean Smith and the squad to answer. To me, it probably feels like a combination of the two. And they seem to buckle really easily under pressure. It's almost like an England Test cricket side collapse watching Norwich City at the moment, because they concede the first goal and often the second, third one follow very quickly indeed. And that was the case. There was 8 minutes between Jamie Vardy's first and second goal. Norwich, between those periods, looked frantic, looked a bit erratic, to be honest. Lacked structure, and that just gifted Leicester a foothold in the game. They just slipped it in a higher gear for 5 or 10 minutes. Were able to score 3 goals, and then from there just took their foot off the accelerator, and it became about game management. And that's something we talk about, issues that Norwich City are going to have to address. This losing culture, this mentality that they have at this moment in time, is something that they will have to address next season, because the Championship is all about being relentless and standing up to different challenges and different adversities when they arrive, because you get different challenges in the Championship. They'll be going to, I don't mean to disrespect anyone here, but they'll be going to Hull City in midweek, for example, and facing a completely different challenge to when they will play them at home, for example, where maybe it'll be more dependent on their possession-based football and how they break teams down. So they have to change that mentality and that culture within the group ahead of next season. And that's kind of where I'm prefacing all of this with, really, because it's, in many ways it's irrelevant talking about this season now. Have we learned anything new tonight? Not really. Have we learned anything revelatory about Norwich City? No, they're down, they're gone, they're not good enough for this league. We could repeat, we could rant. There's no point. It's a waste of everyone's time. It's now about how they fix this and move forward. And that is one thing that Dean Smith, through recruitment, through coaching, through structure, that Norwich City have to get better at. They have to become more durable. They have to be able to take punches at the moment and continue to move forward, as the old Rocky quote goes. And at the moment, they can't do that. They take one punch to the chin and they're suddenly on the canvas and getting a pounding from their opponent, and that is something that will have to change if Norwich City are going to bounce back. And how they do that, maybe it's experience, maybe it's cooler heads, I'm not sure, but that's a big challenge for them. In terms of positives tonight, like I said, I thought the first half was okay. Actually, I felt that Norwich moved the ball pretty well. They looked relatively creative. They looked like they could carve out openings, particularly on the counter attack, which felt kind of why Dean Smith opted to put Tony Springett into the side for his pace in transition. And there was a lot of space behind James Justin that he exploited at points, and that was positive to see. Again, only 19 years of age, and he came in and kind of showed the same fearlessness. I felt he burnt out a little bit in the second half, but that's probably somewhat understandable, really, given his age and the fact that this was his first senior start for Norwich City. But plenty for him to build on. Yeah, I mean, it's tough at the minute, isn't it? I think when you've got 1,300, I'm not convinced it was 1,300, but that was certainly the amount of tickets that Norwich City sold for tonight. Fans coming up here for a team that's already relegated. Actually, it's very difficult then to construct an argument that there's very little to play for, because in reality, you're playing for those fans who were excellent tonight, I thought, actually. And as you can see, that corner, there you go, is where the Norwich City fans were situated. We were over here on the opposite side of the ground, and they were pretty much all you could hear even after the third goal. So there was a small, to me, it sounded like a minority. I had someone in the live blog who said that they had someone in the away end who said that it was more of a majority. That's probably not for me to comment, but there was certainly a chance of we want Webber out, which again kind of leads on to the protest stuff that happened on Sunday. Norwich fans do want to see some accountability for what has been a really poor season, and understandably so. And I suppose the other question now goes on to Dean Smith. There's a lot of stuff that certainly that I've seen in the last two games about him and his role within this. And on the one hand, I feel it is tough to properly assess him as a football manager in this situation, because ultimately he's dealing with a group of players and inherited a group of players that aren't good enough. And I think all we've learned about Dean Smith in reality is that maybe he's not a magician, and he's not someone that can produce miracles and turn water into wine. And that's not to talk down on him, but at the same time, I'm wrestling with this idea that I would have liked to have seen a bit more principles of play, a bit more of an idea of what a Dean Smith Norwich City will look like next season. I'm still not really any wiser than I was when he was appointed in November. And to be fair, this point about identity and playing style, this was a criticism that was levelled at him while he was in charge of Aston Villa as well. And I think when we talk about players' lack of confidence, that can ebb into coaches as well. They can become part of that losing culture that he's described, and it can be difficult to get yourself out of that, or step out of that to look at the bigger picture. Now, ultimately, we won't know the answer to those questions until next season, and this is where you would hope now this season is going to fizzle out. Norwich City have 2 games left at Wolves and Spurs. They're immaterial in the grand scheme of things. There's obviously the carrot of finishing above Watford. I mean, does anyone really care at this point? I'm not obviously convinced, maybe beyond the financial people in the football club. Of course, they would benefit an extra £2 million from that, but in the grand scheme of things, I'm not sure that supporters are particularly bothered if they finish 19th or 20th. It doesn't change the narrative or maybe the answers around this season. So doesn't really feel like that. Pride, maybe, but then they need to be a bit more durable than they are, and that's just a fact. That's a criticism of the whole group. Positives, I want to mention Angus Gunn tonight. I had a really good chat with him just a minute ago, and very good, speaking about how this season has been, speaking about the group, about this idea of setbacks and not being able to take them. And it was a big call I felt from Dean Smith tonight to put Angus in. Probably a fair one on reflection, given the mistakes that Tim Krul has made, particularly in the games against Manchester United, Newcastle, and obviously on Sunday against West Ham as well. Probably felt like it was due a change. Some would maybe argue that Angus was a little bit unlucky to lose his place initially to Tim Krul when he returned from injury. I would concur with that. I felt there were some good performances in there, and there were certainly 4 top-class saves tonight. One was a double save. I think it was whose shot was it? Maybe Tielemans' shot from the edge of the box that he palms away from goal as well. Harvey Barnes latches onto it, and he manages to get his hand back up, gets himself upset quickly to save the second shot. And then in the same phase of play, James Maddison is played through in the right of the area, and he manages to claw his shot out of the top corner. It's a wonderful save. And then the final one was a cross, might have been Dewsbury Hall again to Lookman. He sweeps it towards the far corner. Looks like it's going to be a goal, and Angus Gunn manages to get his foot to it and to stop it. So he was a positive tonight, and there were Springett as well, various others. But for me, it's becoming increasingly difficult to add any sort of insight really on this Norwich City team, or to offer an explanation for where they are at the moment. I think it's just almost getting through these last two games now, making them as pain-free as possible for everyone, for the supporters, for the players, for Dean Smith, and because this is a death by 1,000 cuts. Essentially, they're losing games. They haven't scored in 4 games. This is the 4th time this season that they've lost by 5 goals. They've lost 5 games or more in a row. It's been a devastating season, hasn't it? It's been a disastrous season for Norwich City, given the increased rhetoric and the expectation that was placed on it, not by fans, by people inside the club as well. It hasn't transpired in that way. Would have, again, as I say, like, if I would have been honest, I would have liked to have seen more of a clear idea of what Dean Smith is trying to implement. Although I do feel there is plenty of mitigation for this. There's not mitigation for how this season has panned out. For example, we talk about recruitment. I think this point gets missed a little bit. We were having conversations with people who, back in last March, knew that Ollie Skipp was going to become a Tottenham regular. Norwich had time to prepare for that and didn't replace him adequately. Emi Buendia, they did that deal early in order to fund their business partly, but also so they could move on and plan and get the wheels into motion on the future. That didn't pan out in the way that they liked. These are things that they had time to prepare for. It wasn't at the end of the window that they realised Ollie Skipp wasn't going to come back to Carrow Road. It wasn't at the end of the window they flogged Emi Buendia and didn't have time to source a replacement. They did all of those things, and that is ultimately when you kind of put this season under scrutiny. It doesn't stand up to that, and that, I think, is the frustrations of the supporters, who, as I say, I think have been a lot more patient than perhaps a lot of fans in the country of other clubs would be. Because if this was happening at lots of clubs, there would be mass protests, bigger than the ones we've already seen Norwich fans deliver. So, another tough Premier League night. 2 more games to go until this season's ended. I was talking to my colleagues our colleagues at Radio Norfolk, who were kind of saying it feels like Norwich have played about 50 games this season and won very few of them. And there's been very few reasons for optimism as well. If you're going to Wolves, I raise my hat to you, invisible one, obviously. You must be a glutton for punishment, but as is football, it's something that people really struggle to walk away from, isn't it? And of course, we'll be at Molineux on Sunday and at Carrow Road the following weekend when Spurs come to town and Norwich conclude their Premier League season, which I think, to be honest, will be met with a lot of relief. That'll do me for tonight. I'll leave you with this wonderful shot of this stadium, the King Power Stadium, of course, which is a European stadium now. Norwich City aren't going to be back here next season. They're not going to be back here for a while, but it's worth taking in as much of the Premier League sites as we can at this point. Of course, plenty more content to come on the Pink and Plus app in the next hours and days as well. My chat with Angus Gunn being one of them, so make sure you're subscribed, and also keep an eye out on the app as well. Some very exciting news I think is dropping later this week, so that'll be good, and you'll enjoy that as well, I am sure. Thank you very much for watching. I'll leave you with this wonderful shot of the King Power Stadium, and we'll see you at Molineux again on Sunday for more fun and games.